What's up, guys? In today's video I'm going to go over some of the things that I've been doing and baits that I've been using to catch all of the fish that I've been catching the past couple months with this just insane heat. I've been doing a few things that I'm not used to doing that has been working for me, so I'm going to share that information with you guys. So let's get into this. In the morning, I'm going straight to a frog or a buzzbait and giving it a shot for a little while. I mean, I'm going to give it a good 30 minutes or so, kind of back and forth between a frog and a buzzbait. If I can't get a bite on that within the first 30 minutes, I'm gonna start throwing something else. And during that period, I'm gonna have a flipping rod ready to go and start flipping around at a few things. Just try to get that bite to see if that bite's going, and if it is, then I'll keep doing that and try to build a pattern and just keep the frog and the buzzbait ready. But I'm going to try to get as many bites on that topwater as I can, because I can cover water as fast as possible. I don't have to worry about getting snagged and costing time, and this time of the year is your best time of the year, in my opinion, to be able to catch them on a frog. So the frogs I've been throwing have been the new 6 Sense frogs. I'll drop one right here, and primarily like a white pearl color. And then the buzzbait I'm using is just a regular Strike King buzzbait. If I'm not going to throw a white, I'm going to throw a black. If I'm fishing muddy water, I'm going to throw a black frog, and if the fish are really finicky, I'm in clear water, I'll throw a black frog too, just because it kind of doesn't stand out as much, and it's just more of a reaction bite. So once that's over, I'm either going to go straight to fishing points with a moving bait like a crankbait, or what I've been doing lately is this War Eagle spinnerbait. If I'm in muddy water, this has been my go-to spinnerbait. This Indiana blade right here, it's kind of a mix between a willow leaf and a Colorado. Puts out a little bit more vibration, but it's in a smaller package, kind of easier to bite package. That's been working really good for me. And then a KVD square bill. That's depending on where I'm at. If I'm fishing a canal, then I'm going to throw the 1.5. If I'm fishing in a little small reservoir, then I'm going to throw the 2.5. I might throw the 1.5, but it's going to depend on where they're at in the water and how big the fish I know I'm targeting are. With those things, if I can't get a bite there, then I'm going straight to plastic and I'm staying there all day. Unless I pull up on a point where I can see them feeding, or if I see them on live scope feeding, then I'll go back to a moving bait. Even the moving bait, it might not be a crankbait or spinnerbait, and I'll show you guys what I'm talking about. Stay tuned, because this has been a very good bait for me the past couple months. So I've been catching them on the Cajun Lures Bayou Bug and the Kraken Crawl. Now what I'm doing different is I'm not throwing them on a Texas rig. I'm throwing them on, I think it's the Chompers. I'll put that right here. I'm catching them on the Chompers wobblehead jig head, and I'm throwing, I believe it's like a 3/8, or it might even be a half. Depends on what I'm doing. That wobblehead jig head has been a game changer for me. I've never really thrown a wobblehead, but I've seen a few other guys talking about them, just giving it a little bit more action under the water, and it's been an absolute game changer. I didn't have another peg when I was fishing about a month ago. I did not want to just throw a loose bullet weight on the worm that I was throwing. Again, I'd heard that the wobblehead kind of stands out really good during this time of the year, so I happened to have one of those, and I tied it on, and immediately it was like somebody flipped a switch, and I started catching some good fish, and I ended up with 15 pounds that day, which around here, there's been a lot of tournaments won recently with 12, 11 pounds, 10 pounds, just because it's been so hot. The conditions aren't perfect. So yeah, so the Cajun Lures Bayou Bug and the Cajun Lures Crack and Crawl on a wobblehead jig head have been phenomenal for me past couple months, and still right now is where I'm predominantly throwing. Y'all know I'm a flipping guy, so anytime I can be throwing a plastic, that's what I'm going to do, because that's what I'm the most comfortable with. And if you aren't right mentally, then it's going to be a tough day. So if that doesn't work, then I'm going to start throwing a drop shot. And call me crazy all you want, but if you're flipping a bank, depending on how deep the water is on the bank, you can throw a drop shot in 3 foot of water, and those finicky fish that aren't really in the mood to eat anything else will start eating a drop shot. These little Ned worms, these are the rattling Neds. They have rattles in them. So you see them and it just looks like a little Ned worm, but you can actually hear, I'll take one out and show you guys. You can actually hear the rattle inside of this worm. That little bit when it's sitting on a drop shot is sometimes all you need, that little tiny bit of rattle to make those fish bite, to get your limit. If that doesn't work, this little finesse shad from Z-Man on a drop shot has been working perfect as well. It's just so finesse, it's so natural looking, and it blends in perfectly. Now, if you're fishing around docks, whenever it's hot, you don't have any moving water, and those fish are going to suspend in the shade underneath the dock, these new Yamamoto Yamatanukis 3.5 inch are I'm not a fan of throwing weightless worms. Can't stand it. I like to feel something on the end of my line at all times, just to know it's there. These little Yamatanukis are the perfect weightless bait that you can throw, and the way their action in the water is pretty incredible. You can wacky rig these, or you can just Texas rig them with no weight. And that little tail right there moves around just like a fish's tail, a brim's tail, and they dance around in the water really nice. And you can keep these baits in front of those suspended fish so much better. And you can do the same thing with a wacky rig, but I just don't really like throwing a wacky rig. I can skip this thing from one side of one dock to the other side of 3 docks down. It skips amazing. It's round, it's got the slots in it to pass your hook through, so it stays weedless, and the action on it's pretty incredible. So now I want to talk about tactics for where you're fishing. Right now, if you're fishing a tidal water, it is absolutely critical to be scouting the same expected tide that you're going to go fish a tournament in. And if you're not fishing a tournament, it's absolutely critical to be monitoring that tide. If that tide's going to be falling at 11 o'clock in the afternoon, that's when you need to be there. You need to be there at 10 o'clock, and you need to be sitting on your spot ready to go at 11 o'clock with a bait in the water. As soon as that tide starts falling, those fish are going to be setting up on the outside of that structure. Any structure that there is, they're going to be sitting on the outside of the structure or on the slack side of the structure, being lazy for bait fish to pass by them. If the tide's rising, they're going to be on the opposite side of that structure. You need to find that slack water on whatever structure you're fishing, and that's where you want to land your bait. If you got a line of stumps in the water and the tide's falling out, you need to be on the slack side of the stump. Any of these bait, you need to throw it past the stump if possible. Bring it back past the stump. You don't want to drop it right on the top of that stump, because the fish is sitting there and he might spook. You're going to get a lot more of those bite if you throw that bait past the stump and bring it back to the stump. If you're fishing a grass edge, same thing. You need to be on the down current side of that grass. If there's no cover, you need to be in that grass. Those fish right now are going to be in that submerged grass, submerged hydrilla, underneath pads, disregarding current. When the sun's up and there's no other cover, if you're fishing a canal, you have some pads, you need to be targeting the clusters of those pads, not the little onesie twosie. You need to find the clusters of those pads, something different that those fish can relate to. So if you're fishing pads, find the clusters of stems coming up. Don't just fish the symmetrical, evenly spaced out pads. Find those thick clusters of stems coming up, and there's fish underneath them. Punch them, throw a frog on them, do whatever you need to do. You can even throw a spinnerbait into them and work it slowly through, slow roll it through those pads. It's kind of annoying. You're going to get stuck on a few, but when you're bringing it through those pads and those fish are there, that spinnerbait you can work slowly enough and it's weedless enough to not get caught most of the time, and those fish will slam it. Now, if you're fishing lakes and there's not any current, you need to be throwing on those docks. You need to capitalize in the morning in the shade. You need to be throwing moving bait, said the frog, spinnerbait, crankbait, plastics it doesn't matter, find your bite and stay on that bite as long as you can, because as soon as that sun comes up, you don't have any cover, it's going to start getting tougher. The drop shot, you can go watch the thermocline, but if you have live scope, you can see that on live scope. Watch the thermocline, those fish will suspend on the top of it. So this right here works good. Deep cranking, spinnerbait, letting it sink a good bit. Wacky rig, there's a school of them. Even this on a 1/8 ounce jig head with a spinning rod, super ultra light, you can throw that out there and work it and just twitch it. I mean, that's what Jacob Wheeler's doing right now, and it's working so great for him. Ben Milliken's doing the same thing, not necessarily that bait, but something similar, and just an ultra finesse presentation where you can keep that bait in front of that fish until they eat. They're not all going to eat, and right now, if you are live scoping fish, in my experience, if you can't get those fish to get excited as a group and all start chasing that bait, you're likely not going to be. If you just see one or two fish and neither of them move on the bait, the other one's likely not going to move on the bait. If you can find a school of fish that's excited about that bait passing them, you can usually catch a couple fish out of that school. But shade, throwing weightless baits underneath the docks, shooting the docks, and shallow structure, anything with shade, anything with grass, that's, it doesn't matter if it's 5 foot of water, if there's grass in it, those fish will get down into that grass, get out of the sun a little bit, and sit there waiting for food to pass by. The offshore structure, as long as it's above the thermocline, deep cranking, spinnerbait, those are going to be your best bets, and that's how I've been catching my fish lately. So I hope you learned something from this. If you have any questions, drop them in the comments below. I'll see you guys on the next one. Peace.